Namaste, everyone. I'm going to give you Kundalini Yoga for the household Mandala, and we're going to talk briefly about what the household Mandala is. Basically, the more activations you do, the more energy you are creating within your space, right? And the energy we want to create in our space, just like feng shui of a house, right? Just like geomancy or sacred geometry when it comes to like a garden, right? Or in many ways we look at temples, it's very much a sacred geometry that's taking place. We want to create the kind of energy that has this sort of it's a space holder for imagination, right? We want to be very nourished, right? Very, very nourished, because that's how we're able to, right, grow, right? Like soil, right? See yourself as soil, and we know to have, right, to plant your seeds, you need to have a pretty vital soil, right? So the reason we feng shui our house, the reason we participate in geomancy or sacred geometry, is because we want to create the particular energy around us that is holding a space or holding a vibration for things to come in, right? Because these higher frequencies are accessible, but we don't have the proper container or the proper vessel, right, to actually let it in, right? We can't let it in, right? So there's a lot of reasons why we're not letting it in, right? But a lot of it could be our household Mandala, right? And it's, again, when we think about feng shui, we can think of ourselves as not feng shui properly, or there's some sort of arrhythmia going on inside of us, right? And we know the common blockage, right? Blockage, whatever that is, where it feels like there's a blockage. And for some people, it can be emotional blockage. Other people, it can be a sexual blockage. I mean, it could be a mental blockage, right? Basically, there's some sort of built up of energy that's not circulating properly. We talk about being in the flow, right? When we talk about all these brilliant, prolific minds like Doreen Virtue, who has PhD in child psychology, who has this whole archive of oracle cards and books, right? All in the sort of realm of, metaphysics or spirituality or these kinds of things. And C.S. Lewis, J.K. Rowling, like these individuals are seen as prolific, right? Where it's like the creativity, it just keeps flowing. Like, think of yourself like a gold chalice, and the energy that's flowing in is flowing in, flowing in, flowing and flowing. It's overflowing, right? And there are a lot of people like that, right? There are a lot of people I know who have that sort of, they're literally a chalice that's just overflowing, right? They're this giving, right? This giving energy, right? And to be a giving energy, it's about a big aura, right? So those people who have this very giving energy, and I'm not talking about just generosity as in giving or to others or service. I'm talking about the giving of the self and the nourishment of a person. Like when you see these very nourished people, you could tell they're giving a lot. There's this overflowing of this giving into the aura, like they're like a fountain that never ends, right? The water just keeps moving and moving through them, right? And many people can get, again, called dried up, right? Where there's a fountain and there hasn't been much water that's poured in for some time, right? And that can happen mentally, sexually, and really in all areas. So really with feng shui, sacred geometry and geomancy is really about keeping your place, your home, right, activated, right? And activation is very much about harnessing the cycles that are going on this planet, like the cycles of astrology or cosmology, or the cycles of the new moon, the full moon, right? And these are very much what our ancestors did. And a lot of geomancy, feng shui, and sacred geometry is a very ancient practice that a lot of it was the practitioners were very much belonging to a matriarchal society. When we think of ancient Egypt, they were way into feng shui, sacred geometry, geomancy, right? But a lot of it is a lot of the matriarchal society of ancient Egypt has been deconstructed. So a lot of it, we don't even see it, right? And a lot of Egyptologists can see these ruins, but they don't know what era does this ruin belong to, right? Is it this pharaoh? Is it that pharaoh? And we're starting to discover that a lot of these sort of ruins, actually, there's many sort of errors that have traveled through ancient Egypt, not just patriarchal society, right? There was actually another, it's almost like there's layers. There's layers to Egypt, ancient Egypt, right? There's the patriarchal Egypt. If you go deeper, there's another civilization. You go deeper, there's like another civilization throughout hundreds of years of time, right? And that's quite fascinating, right? But a lot of these ancient sort of rituals, practices, right, of activation really does belong to ancient matriarchal society that, again, practitioners of the healing arts, the healing science. And we know ancient Egypt was very much into sound healing, was very much into many forms of movement, right? Shamanistic movement, which I kind of see Qigong, Tai Chi as a shamanistic movement, because it really unlocks deeper energy, right, that you can use for meditation, right, which is kind of the purpose. You need a lot of energy to have this sort of astral projection type of meditations, right? Gives you fuel, right? So, and with our household mandala, we really do want to create this sort of, this sort of energy, this sort of a space where whatever that's held in the Akashic record of this earth or on another planet, for that to come in. Because there's a lot of us as creative people, we're just channeling. That's all we're doing. We're just channeling, right? And the people that have that sort of, I've noticed the people that have that sort of instinctual, intuitive strive tend to be the ones that have the most sort of prolific ability to channel these energies, because that's all we're doing, is we're just channeling higher vibrations. And these higher vibrations, you need to have a certain activation, right? So a lot of times, after Kundalini yoga or sort of mantra recitation, a lot of people get a lot of visions. They get a lot of visions, they get a lot of ideas, they get a lot of sort of just, even dreams. Their dreams are heightened. They get messages in their dreams. Because to really, to receive that sort of overflowing of energy, you really do have to be activated, right? You have to be activated because it wants to pour into you. And I've noticed the people, again, like I said, who are men or women who, again, have that more instinctual, intuitive, like command with themselves and with life, right? Again, a lot of them can be risk takers. A lot of them actually have a sort of metaphysical type of capability to connect with openness of themselves. A lot of these individuals have this level of imagination that has gifted them these sort of lucrative ideas and stuff like that, right? And that really comes from your household mandala. Like when you go to a temple, right? Why do you go to a temple? Because you want to be activated. Why do you pray to, right, this deity? Because you want to be activated. Even with Jesus Christ, you want to be activated, right? There's all these type of religions and these sort of religious places. We want to be activated because we know in being activated and possessing higher energy, right, a greater, stronger energetic space, we're actually able to really receive more. And I think that's really what we're working on as human beings, is how to receive more, right? More ideas, more direction, right? More achievement, more victory, right? More healing energy, right? So we're going to work on clearing out the sort of clutter, the blockages, right? Because working just with the household mandala, that is you, right? And wherever you go, you could walk into any place, any environment, any home, no matter if it's super cluttery, it's not cluttery, and your energy, your presence can actually create a sort of, it can activate the space. So a lot of yogis, gurus, like literally they just come to the people and they're just activated by that person. And I think the greatest activational force is the heart chakra, right? It's the greatest activational force. And that's why a lot of yogis sit on a sort of a, what do we call it, a platform, so that their heart, right, when you're seated below the yogi and he's seated on a platform, right, your eye is at the level of the yogi's heart. When you're seated in the audience looking up at the yogi on the platform, you're looking at their heart. So literally the eyes are being penetrated by the heart of the yogi, right, or the teacher. And that's the greatest sort of magnetic force, right? The greatest sort of, you could say, the heart of your household mandala is your heart, is your magnetic field of the heart. That's your greatest sort of, frequency, the strongest frequency in your house, right? When we think of like the kitchen, the hearth, usually that's associated with having a very strong vibration, a very high vibration, right? Especially if it has a really defined ma frequency. Because the kitchen, since ancient times, it has been a place of heightened senses being activated by the food, right? In ancient, times, I mean, kind of in many ways it's not like that now. The hearth has been a place of gathering, a place of sharing, a place of receiving energy through the food and just through conversation with each other. It's a telling of stories, right? It's a place of healing through food, right? So the strongest sort of frequency of your household mandala is the hearth, like the kitchen, and that's your heart. That's your heart. That's what activates, stimulates the heart, is the ma frequency, is the hearth, the kitchen. That's what gives you the greatest stimulation, the greatest activation of your heart, right? So a lot of time, food is one of the fastest and one of the most powerful ways of expanding your heart and the heart frequency, right? And a lot of us, we don't experience that because a lot of us just eat this junk food and then think, that's just what it's about. But really, food in the times that are still happening, right, it was more of a way to expand your heart. It wasn't just a way to just get you energy so you can keep pushing and pushing and pushing, right, to do the work, the hard work, work. It wasn't really a way to get you energy. It was more of a way to get you expansion of the heart, to nourish you, right? If food had a vibration to it that could help you soothe your emotional and give you balance, right? Food was more of a stabilizing force, right? To give you strength, but also give you stability of yourself and expansion of yourself, right? But it wasn't like what it is today, this sort of glutton type of, type of just keep consuming and consuming and consuming type of thing, right? It was more so, again, food was more seen as a ritual. The preparation, even the hunting, it was more of a ritual. It was more of a getting connected to the earth, more grounding you, rather than just consume, very irritably, very impulsively, and very disconnected. It's like a lot of people don't even know what they're consuming. They're just consuming whatever. They're like McDonald's. They have no idea where that meat's coming from, and they're just consuming it like I don't care, right? So the main point of the house has always been the hearth. And you can go into a house, big or small. It could be the biggest mansion. It could be the smallest little house. And you could tell just by going into the house how strong the heart is of the house. You can feel how magnetic that house is. Again, it could be the biggest mansion of all the mansions. The kitchen could be the most beautiful kitchen, but that's not it. It's about the nourishment. What is that kitchen receiving? Is that kitchen receiving anything at all? Right? Right? And that to receive is to have a space, right? And usually that who receives that sort of that powerful expansion is the woman, or the ma frequency, right? It could be a man, it could be a woman, but there's a ma frequency, a feminine energy, right, that cultivates. So you talk about the woman of the kitchen, or the woman of the hearth, when she has that sort of connection to the earth, to her garden, or whatever connection to the elemental realm, that is what gives the whole house, all the bedrooms, top floor, bottom floor, attic, basement, gives the whole house this whole sort of like a temple, or like a place you go and you immediately feel activated, right? Like you going into the house and you could feel the sort of the overflowing of the person's chalice, the overflowing of the person's chalice. It just keeps overflowing, and that definitely has an impact on the house you're in. And even, you could go into big houses, the mansions or whatever, and it doesn't have it. You go in, you're like, it feels kind of like empty, right? Even though there's like all this fancy stuff, it feels kind of like cold, stoic, empty, kind of barren, right? Have you ever felt that? Right? It's just like there's something missing, right? It doesn't really feel lively in a way that, again, lively as in like overflowing, right? Of that, that fountain that's overflowing with energy, with chi, right? Because you can fill your mansion, your house with a bunch of people, and that creates heat, that creates energy, that creates movement. But then there's a different kind of movement. There's a movement that happens in the silence, right? You can have a house, a big family, and so much movement, so much energy, very rambunctious, and like family, that kind of friction that creates a lot of sort of movement of change, right? But then there's also this sort of wind horse that's this silent kind of energy, or this wind that moves through the spaces of the house when it's empty, and you tap into that, right? And it's a frequency. For many of, like I said, that real sort of household Mandela, it's a frequency of Ma. It's a frequency of connection to the earth that gives this house this sort of root system, this sense of nourishment, this sense of communion with spirit, or the communion with earth, the communion with spirituality, or just the communion with man and woman, right? It gives you that sort of activation, right? When it has that sort of groundedness, you're deeply activated by it, right? When you can feel the expansion of the heart of that house, or the heart of the people that live there, that house becomes extremely magnetic. Either it's a little house or a big house. And that's the same thing with you, right? You can have that sort of expansion of you, where you literally, your presence, it is just as, sort of big as like a whole group of people, and just a party and all that big energy moving. You can have that just as you, that kind of, that big energy that creates a lot of change. And I think that's why a lot of people love the temples. They go to the, sort of the museums of poets, who are deceased, and, musicians, or, of people, right, who were very activated in life, very connected to the earth, that were channelers. Because people want to be activated, because activation, friction, that gives you change, that gives you movement. And that's what we're about as human beings. We need that friction. We need whatever that is that seems challenging, or, frictional, creating this sort of friction in our life to really get things moving. Because if we had it our way as human beings, we would just be nice and comfy, cozy, never leaving our house, never talking to our family, and just never having to really deal with anything, right? And that's why we have these kinds of relatives, and these type of boyfriends or girlfriends, or these type of people that come into our life to shake it up. Because that, a lot of times, in order for us to really kind of clear out whatever in us that, again, is not as that is kind of worn down, haggard, outdated, right? We have to shake it up. We have to, in many ways, the friction of our people, that people around us give us that change, that movement. And your household Mandala, the more you activate yourself, the more that you are igniting change within yourself. A lot of times when people start to activate themselves, they start to get, emotional or triggered, or like, this isn't working, or this isn't, I don't like this. It makes me feel uncomfortable. It brings things up, right? It's because it's meant to change you, right? It's meant to change you. You're creating movement. You're moving through these things, right? So you can liberate these things. So these things are no longer a blockage. So these things are no longer a fear that has you sort of holding back. And that's wonderful about the sort of ability to not be intimidated by being activated by somebody else who seems bigger energy than you, or whatever it is, smarter than you, whatever it is, to not be intimidated by being activated, right? There's something that can actually really open up your whole aura, really create this openness, right? But we have to get over the fear of being, fear of intimidation, being intimidated, being overwhelmed, the intensity of it, right? Because a lot of these things going into it, these activations, these sort of installing and integrating these frequencies, can seem very daunting, and seem very sort of uneasy at times, very shaky, right? Because it really demands of you to start to behave and start to function in a way that maybe you never have ever in any incarnation, right? But the people that they do it is because they want to have more of this flow. They want to be this chalice that's overflowing with water, overflowing with energy. And a part of being overflowing with energy is that you do have to be receptive. You do have to be evolutionary. You do have to purify, and you do have to become more natural. And it's the most natural thing for us as human beings to be changed by our environment, right? It could be for the good, for the bad, right? It could go either way on that kind of polarity type of thing. And that's natural for us, right? But what else is also natural, as any animal would agree, is it to be instinctual and to be intuitive, and to have a sort of command over the amount of energy that we can use, that we can store as reserve, and what energy we can use to help us expand our strengths, right? And a lot of animals are doing that right now, to expand their strengths, using their energy or reserving energy. So we're going to work on that together when it comes to our household Mandala, and really working on, again, we can take on things, we can hoard things, we can absorb things, we can accumulate things, we can get really, really stagnant in things, ruts, dead energy, dead weight, and then that just creates a major sort of, right, it just makes us feel slow and just like, right? And that's why we have change, and that's why we have people come in our life that are like, give us that kind of, even a way that seems bad, or like you're like, oh my god, this person, right? They're there to get you that change. There's some kind of movement you want to make in your life, and that person is triggering something in you, activating something in you, right? Which is going to potentiate you into making these sort of courageous moves that you probably wouldn't do unless you had that type of resistance or that type of friction in your life, right? You probably wouldn't have, none of us as human beings would evolve to the extent that we're capable of if we didn't have that challenge or that friction or that relative or whatever it is. A lot of us would just remain in the past lives repeating the same patterns, right? And just do that for eternity, right? So a lot of us are meant to really become wise, like wise old souls. And to become wise old souls is really an act of being connected to the earth being natural. In many ways, we can get very unnatural when we have all this fear and then all this anxiety and all of this, whatever it is that we do that keeps us in a standstill, that keeps us hiding or keeps us ashamed or embarrassed of ourselves, right? It's very natural to be like that as a human being, and many people are, right? What is very natural for us is to go through the polarity, go through whatever that bad, whatever that good is, so that we can find our intuition, so we can find our instincts, so that we can get wiser. Like any animal out there, everything they're doing is an act of, I'm trying to get wiser, I'm trying to get more instinctual, right? I'm trying to have a greater experience of my energy, right? So I want a greater experience of my energy so I can know how to stabilize, how to balance it, how to use it, how to harness it, how to cultivate it, how to project it, how to channel it, how to open it up, how to extend it beyond this world, beyond this universe. That's what we're all doing. We're all learning about this energy, right? And right now we're learning, a lot of us are just mainly learning about the physical energy and how to work the physical energy. But there's a lot of us who are also working on the spiritual energy, the emotional energy, the mental energy, the sexual energy, and those are all part of the household Mandala. And the more we start to activate these sort of subtle realities to ourselves, right, the more that we're becoming more well-rounded in the mandala of our energy and our aura and our presence. Our character becomes a lot more complex, but yet it becomes a lot more energy expansive, right? In what we become more multi-talented, more multifaceted, more multi-dimensional. And I think that's the type of energy that we are desiring as human beings to cultivate, right? And we have in previous incarnations of golden ages and matriarchal societies, we have been able to cultivate that. But a lot of us, we mainly just know the physical energy. But the physical energy is not the only thing. It's a piece of it, right? But it's really not the energy that's going to sort of give us these type of openings or these opportunities or these sort of new realities that a lot of us yearn for, a lot of us are waiting for, a lot of us spend lifetimes cultivating it, right? It's really the frequency of the heart that again has the most prevailing force in all the chakras. The frequency of the heart being able to elevate the whole entire chakra system. And that's what the heart does. It will literally elevate each chakra from the navel or the root chakra all the way to the crown chakra. The heart chakra will literally elevate. And a lot of times our chakra systems, for many, it's like in the mud or it's like in the swamp, right? It's diluted, it's shrunken, it's like many, it's just sitting there, right? It is blocked. So we have a lot of these blocked chakras because of trauma or shame or a lot of unresolved pains and a lot of discord that they have within themselves, their family and life and past life stuff. But the more that we do amplify the frequency, it gets emotional, it gets intimidating because that heart is very powerful. And that's why people are a little bit shooken by these gurus and yogis and teachers and stuff, right? That's why, like, I don't want to go to the teacher today because they intimidate the hell out of me, right? Is because they activate you, they're changing you, right? In a way that is giving you in this life an opportunity to really develop yourself, not just your physical body, the mind, the sexuality, spirituality, emotional, the subtle body, the mind, negative, positive, neutral mind, the radiant self, right? There's so many, the developments that are happening, And I think in the final incarnations, or and as we move into more finer incarnations, more creative incarnations, we start to really start to, as a human being, come into this life and start to have more of developed senses, not just the physical sense, right? We start to develop even more senses, right? Because we have 360 senses, right? That's a lot, right? That's a lot. Um, in many ways, in order to really develop or even awaken these senses, we do agree in many ways before this life, and we also decide in our life that we want to be activated, we want to be triggered, we want to be stimulated in such a way that's really going to give us a bigger energy, a bigger container, a bigger vessel, right? Energy wise, right? A stronger life force, that more energy can come through us. Not just through the physical body, such as exercise and hitting the gym, right, doing your HIIT workout. I'm talking about bigger energy for emotional healing, or mental, intelligence or imagination, or sexual. We want a deeper sexual, more of a more energy regarding our sexual life, right?